In 1863, a colonel in Indiana mortgaged his factory to buy rifles for his men because the Union Army would not. The rifle had passed every military test. The Navy fired 500 rounds through one without cleaning it. The president tested it himself, drove 7 shots into a board at 40 yards, and ordered it issued to the troops. One general stopped all of it. His name was James Ripley. The two men who defined this argument never shared a room. Ripley sat in Washington. Wilder worked wherever the Army sent him. Men were dying in the distance between their answers. James Ripley was a brigadier general, appointed chief of ordnance in August 1861. He was a veteran of 2 prior American wars, a man who had spent 4 decades learning that armies run on systems, not novelty. His institutional knowledge looked like wisdom from inside and obstruction from outside. John Wilder owned a foundry in Greensburg, Indiana. He was 31 years old when he enlisted as a private and was promoted to captain on his 2nd day. He had no prior wars and no professional stake in any particular design. He commanded men who needed to stay alive. On the surface, the argument was about a rifle. Christopher Spencer of Hartford patented his repeating rifle in 1860. The Navy fired 500 rounds through one without cleaning it. There was one misfire. The Army buried one in sand, soaked it in salt water for a full day, and fired it. It worked. The men who watched those tests understood what they were seeing. The men who read the reports in Washington understood something different. Ripley moved on nothing. In December 1861, he wrote to Secretary of War Simon Cameron, opposing both the Spencer and the Henry, citing weight, special ammunition, the impossibility of using standard cartridges in the field. He called weapons like these new-fangled gimcracks. The letter sounded like caution, but the letter did not say everything. Between 1842 and 1854, as superintendent of the Springfield Armory, Ripley had improved production, reduced costs, and helped develop the .58 caliber rifled musket that became the Union's standard infantry weapon. He was not simply an old fool defending sentiment. He was a man defending a system he had spent his professional life constructing, and that is a different thing. His concerns were not invented. The Union Army was absorbing hundreds of thousands of recruits from state militias armed in more than a dozen incompatible calibers. A supply officer in 1861 could look at his inventory and count ammunition in 12 different sizes, none of them interchangeable, all of them running low. The metallic rimfire cartridge was new. The Spencer cost $40. A Springfield musket cost $15. Ripley had spent his career solving exactly that kind of problem. He was not wrong to see it. He was wrong about what it cost to leave the other problem unsolved. Because here is what a Union soldier with a Springfield musket was doing in 1862 while Ripley wrote his letters. He was ramming powder and ball down a muzzle under fire, pulling the ramrod, seating the charge, fitting a percussion cap onto the nipple with shaking hands, raising the rifle, firing once, then starting over. 2 shots per minute if he was trained, maybe 3 if he was lucky and calm, and no one in a Civil War battle was calm. One American soldier could look across a field at what was coming and know with the arithmetic of it that the time between his shots was the most dangerous place he occupied all day. Some of them never got the second shot off. The Spencer fired 14 to 20 aimed shots per minute. That difference was not a number on a test report. That difference was the amount of time a man spent exposed and defenseless between shots while another man was trying to kill him. By August 1863, the argument had moved past policy. Spencer had spent 2 years navigating the bureaucracy. He wrote letters and demonstrated his rifle to officers who were impressed, then overruled. On August 18, 1863, he walked into the Oval Office and placed the rifle in the president's hands. Lincoln handled it like a man familiar with firearms. He asked to see the inner workings of the weapon. He took it apart and returned the next day. On the White House lawn, at 40 yards, Lincoln fired 7 shots into a 3-by-6-inch target board, hitting the bullseye. He then ordered the Ordnance Department to adopt the Spencer for standard issue. Ripley did not act on the order. A sitting president had personally tested the weapon, approved it, and issued a direct order. The Army's chief of ordnance disobeyed him. Whatever the argument had been before that moment, logistical, financial, technical, it had become something else. Wilder had already stopped waiting. In early 1963, Spencer demonstrated his rifle to the Army of the Cumberland at Murfreesboro, Tennessee. Wilder watched and understood immediately what it meant, not as engineering, but as survival arithmetic. He filed a request through standard channels, denied. He went to a bank in Greensburg, Indiana, mortgaged his foundry, and co-signed a personal $35 promissory note for every man in his command. His soldiers voted unanimously. These were men who had been carrying Springfields in the field. They knew what they were voting for. They had watched what happened in the seconds between shots. They signed their names and pledged 3 months' pay without hesitation. When the government learned what Wilder had done, it reimbursed every man before the notes came due. Quietly, no announcement. The Army simply paid and said nothing. On June 24, 1863, Wilder's brigade entered Hoover's Gap, a 4-mile mountain pass in central Tennessee. General Thomas expected several days of hard fighting. Wilder's men took it in hours. They drove 7 miles into Confederate lines, outnumbered roughly 4-1. When General Bates' infantry came forward to retake the position, they walked into a volume of fire they had never heard before. Not the measured rhythm of muzzle loaders, something continuous, something that did not stop the way rifles were supposed to stop. Bates reported believing he was outnumbered 5-1. He was not. He was outnumbered in reload time, and that felt the same as being surrounded. Confederate losses 146, Wilder's losses 61. Thomas arrived and told Wilder, "You have saved the lives of 1,000 men by your gallant conduct today. I didn't expect to get this gap for 3 days." Confederate soldiers who faced Spencer armed units began calling the rifles horizontal shot towers, a warning passed between regiments, a way of telling men what they were about to walk into. That December letter looks different from this side of the gap. Ripley had written it after seeing favorable Navy results and before the Army's Fort Monroe test. When that second test also passed, he still did not move. Under direct presidential pressure, he ordered 10,000 Spencers on December 26, 1861, then issued them to a single specialized unit while canceling other contracts on technicalities. He ordered the rifle. He made sure almost no one received it. Somewhere that winter, a Union soldier who would never see a Spencer was loading his Springfield by firelight, running the same 4 steps he had run 1,000 times, knowing he would run them again in the morning. He did not know a general in Washington had read a favorable test report and filed it. He just knew what he was carrying, read the letter with that in mind. The logistics concerns were real. The financial arguments were defensible, and underneath all of them was a man who had spent 12 years building the production system around the weapon he was now protecting. A man who could not write in official correspondence that he was defending the monument of his career. So he wrote supply chain, he wrote weight, he wrote gimcracks. The public reason and the private identity were the same document. The cost of that coincidence fell on people who were not in the argument. Lincoln removed Ripley on September 15, 1863. 50 years of service, no public disgrace, a reassignment. By the time he cleared his desk, Gettysburg had been fought. Chickamauga was 3 days away. At Nashville in December 1864, General James Wilson commanded 9,000 mounted infantrymen with Spencers. They flanked Hood's entire army of Tennessee and broke it. Wilson put it plainly, 1 man equipped with a Spencer is equivalent to 3 with any other arm. The enemy answered the argument Ripley had made in 1861. They answered it on a Tennessee battlefield with their own dead. The Spencer Repeating Rifle Company went bankrupt in 1869. Christopher Spencer lived until 1922. He did not grow wealthy from the rifle. Somewhere in America, there is a Spencer carbine on a wall. Not a museum piece, a family piece. The man who owns it has an opinion about what happened. It sounds a lot like Wilder's. He does not know who Wilder was. Down the road, two men are arguing in a gun shop. One trusts the system, the other trusts the field. The argument is not over.